crazy is in the eye of the beholder. At a first glance, it seems like a lot of people do crazy things with their money. Some spend it in ridiculous amounts on ridiculous items, and others hide it under their mattresses. But the thing to remember is that people come from different backgrounds, with different childhoods, different parents, different life experiences, and different educations. All this adds up to different perspectives and different values. What seems crazy to you might make total sense for me. Morgan uses the example of lottery tickets in the book. The lowest income households in the US spends more than $400 per year on the lottery. This is 4 times more than the average in the highest income group. Combine this with the fact that more than a third of Americans cannot come up with $400 for an emergency. Do these people spend their emergency buffer on lottery tickets? Seems crazy, doesn't it? But again, we do not have the same perspective as these individuals. Try to see it from their perspective. They live paycheck to paycheck, with little room to save money. They often lack education, and thus they also lack a nice career trajectory. They can't afford a nice vacation or a new car, and they can't put their children through college without a mountain of debt. Buying a lottery ticket is their way of buying into the dream that many of us already live. That is why they buy more lottery tickets than we do. Not so crazy, after all, perhaps. So, how does this make you a better investor? For one thing, by acknowledging that we are different, we become less tempted to copying an investment portfolio or strategy which doesn't suit our own goals. For example, our risk profile might be higher than that of a billionaire's, as our focus is more on the getting rich part and not so much about staying rich. Copying the billionaire's portfolio might be suboptimal for your goals. Acknowledging differences can also help us to say no more easily to investments that are outside our own circle of competence. Take GameStop, for example. As I am not a trader, I didn't participate in this drama at all. It's simply not my card to play. Understanding different people's perspectives, or at least that there are different lenses to see the world through, will help you make better sense of our society and lead you on the path that is yours. Takeaway number 4. Peekaboo! What does the Great Depression, World War II, the financial crisis, and COVID-19 all have in common? They were all events which shaped our society, they had huge impacts on the financial markets, and they were pretty much impossible to foresee. Nassim Taleb, who is one of my favorite authors, would refer to these events as black swans. The definition of a black swan is that 1. It's an outlier. Nothing that has happened before can convincingly point to even the possibility of the event. 2. It carries an extreme impact. 3. It becomes explainable only after the fact. Human nature fools us into believing that we should have been able to know it would happen all along. Imagine it is Black Monday, 1987. How would you have reacted to the market losing almost 1/4 of its value in a single day? Would you have been one of the individuals that shouted, "Sell! Sell!" Or would you have been able to weather the storm? Perhaps putting in additional chips which you've kept on the sidelines. Here's an interesting fact. If you invested in the S&P 500 index 20 years ago, but you missed out on the 4 best performing stock market days, you'd have a 164% return instead of 291%. That's quite a big difference. The moral of this takeaway is that it's more useful to prepare yourself, both mentally and financially, for a disaster which you cannot foresee than hoping that you're able to react before everyone else. Stop listening to macro projections. The things that will cause big fear among the investment community in the future are the things that are unlikely to be foreseen anyways. Takeaway number 5. The seduction of pessimism. If I were to give you a bunch of reasons to why the market will crash later this year, mentioning the gigantic US governmental debt, that stimulus checks may lead to the return of inflation, and perhaps something about a new strain of COVID-19, you would most likely be intrigued. and perhaps end up with quite a negative view of where in the market cycle that we are at the moment. Were I instead to give you examples of why things probably will continue to get better, by showing how life expectancy is rising, how sustainable energy is getting cheaper, or how computing power is exploding, you would most likely shrug your shoulders and not think twice about it. We all know that the pessimistic person sounds so very intelligent, and the optimist sounds naive in comparison. Why is that? Daniel Kahneman, the author of Thinking Fast and Slow, says that asymmetry towards loss and listening to pessimists is an evolutionary trait. When directly compared or weighted against each other, losses loom larger than gains. Organisms that treated threats as more urgent than opportunities have a better chance to survive and reproduce. We tend to listen to pessimists more carefully, not only for evolutionary reasons, but also because progress happens much slower than setbacks do. Progress rarely happens overnight, but setbacks often do. Because tragedies and setbacks happen during much shorter time periods, it's much easier to create an intriguing and persuading story around it, and thus it receives more attention. To create an optimistic story about the future, we must look at longer time horizons. This often becomes more vague and less dramatic. Knowing that you will perhaps be more fascinated by a pessimist and less so by an optimist can perhaps help you becoming less asymmetric towards this in the future. The world is better than you think, as Sweden's Hans Rosling would have said. So, you are not going to get rich in the stock market without paying the price of volatility. Envy is the worst of the 7 deadly sins. Never risk what you have and need for what you don't have and don't need. Different perspectives cause different courses of action to become reasonable or rational. Instead of trying to foresee disasters, prepare yourself mentally and financially so that you can survive them. And be careful when taking investment advice. Understand that pessimism appeals more to your survival instincts than optimism does. That was it for today, but that was not it from Morgan Housel. Check out his book, it's a real gem. Here's a suggestion on what you can watch next if you want to understand more about human psychology and its relation to money. Cheers!